It's that one hack that everyone should know before working out. 1. Most protein products are a scam because the amount of protein listed on the label isn't the amount that you're actually consuming. Since you can't count how many grams are in a protein product, you have to estimate how much protein there should be by measuring the nitrogen balance. Usually, the more nitrogen a product has, the more protein there should be, but this can be easily faked by increasing the nitrogen balance and using cheaper substitutes. This is called amino spiking, and companies do this to lower manufacturing costs and make a quick profit from consumers. 2. Hemp bars increase your resting energy expenditure, which is the number of calories your body burns when you're not exercising. Unlike most protein products, these bars have protein and fiber, which can boost your metabolism. And because of the fiber, you can easily take out green juices from your diet and replace them with a daily hemp bar. And no, hemp has nothing to do with 420. This is also a much cheaper alternative to green juices. 3. Despite popular belief, eggs are extremely good for you. The cholesterol in eggs doesn't raise your blood cholesterol levels because dietary cholesterol doesn't always have a major effect on blood cholesterol. Also, eggs are naturally a good source of protein that is used to build muscles and improve muscle health, which helps with weight loss. 4. Drinking coffee on an empty stomach first thing in the morning isn't bad for you, and won't spike your cortisol or make you gain belly fat. Your body adapts to drinking coffee in the morning, so just enjoy your cup of joe the second you wake up. I know I will. 5. Green powders like Bloom don't actually heal your guts. If they did, your mom would use them, nor do they reverse bloating. Their fiber counts are insanely high, so they'll just make you drop an atomic bomb in the bathroom. You just have to eat more vegetables instead of drinking green laxatives every day. 6. Repeating workouts usually causes you to hit a plateau because your metabolism stops adapting, and then you're not building any muscle. Sometimes you just have to rest. Don't watch any Goggins clips while you rest though. That will only get you to go back out and hit the gym. 7. You can eat after 8 p.m. and this won't make you gain weight because weight gain depends on caloric intake, not the time you eat. The only reason people say this is because your cravings heighten at night while your inhibition's lower. So, you're just overeating, which can happen at any time of day. You're just more affected at night. 8. Your body has no idea how to tell you it's thirsty. So if you think you're always hungry and aren't drinking enough water, that's your body's way of telling you you're chronically dehydrated. Knowing the difference can keep you from snacking so much, which will help you reach your goal weight much quicker, and you'll get proper hydration. If your body is constantly sending SOS signals that you're thirsty, then you're likely one step away from looking like SpongeBob at Sandy's. Mother-in-law called the police due to tummy time. I really can't believe it, but my mother-in-law claims my partner and I are abusing our baby since he complains while on his tummy. Our doctor said he needs more tummy time for his flat spot, to strengthen his muscles, as well as to help him roll over. He doesn't like tummy time, but it's not like he even gets to the point of crying. He just makes uncomfortable noises. We tried explaining this to mother-in-law, but she keeps claiming we are forcing the baby and abusing him. Mother-in-law has been living with us the last few months and things have gone great until this happened. 2 days ago she snatched the baby from me during tummy time and said I am committing violence against him. I regretted letting her take him but let her. Then yesterday she tried the same thing and I refused to give her my baby. The thing is, I wasn't even doing tummy time. My baby complains when he isn't doing something, he just constantly gets bored. Mother-in-law heard him complaining from another room and came barging in saying I'm abusing him again. I walked away from her and locked the door behind me. She pounded on the door saying she will call the cops and she did. I called my partner who left work immediately and drove home. 2 policemen talked to her and then us. I invited them in and said they could walk around. They looked around and saw an immaculately clean place and a very happy baby. Mother-in-law had not been cleaning up the past couple days or helping with anything like she did in the past, making me think this was premeditated to try and make us look bad, but I had been cleaning behind her. Mother-in-law tried telling the cops that we were dirty because the dirty bottles and snot sucker were in the same place, that we pet the dog then hold the baby, and that we do tummy time where the cat lays on the couch. When she told them that tummy time hurts the baby, they just said I'm not a professional doctor. The police couldn't contain their laughter, saying it sounds like mother-in-law thinks she is the resident expert and that they run into mothers who disagree with parenting styles a lot. I unfortunately couldn't laugh along because I was in tears explaining the situation, but it was obvious the police were on our side. The police told us the clean house does not look like an unsafe environment for the baby. They also informed us that at this point they were just there for a venting session with mother-in-law and not to worry. Of course no police report was filed. My partner had my back the whole time and kicked mother-in-law out of our house. She had a couple hours to pack her bags and then I drove her to a motel. She of course was mad but had no remorse and thinks she did nothing wrong. She doesn't have much money, so my partner and I are paying for it. We got her a flight home tomorrow. I'm not sure what will happen in the future, but it might be the last time mother-in-law sees her grandchild. Mother-in-law has no idea and thinks it's her baby too. Luckily mother-in-law and father-in-law live on the other side of the country. Here's to hoping they never move here. Cheated on my boyfriend with the stripper he was seeing almost daily. It was the best decision I ever made. My now ex-boyfriend was emotionally and verbally mean. He'd call me derogatory names when I didn't do something he wanted and he'd make hurtful comments about my body. I'm not even overweight, but I have body dysphoria. I was crying every single day. I wanted to leave him but I couldn't because I was emotionally dependent on him for everything and we were living together. He started going to strip clubs and being open with me about and telling me he enjoys seeing women that look better than me. He went so often that I felt like he was cheating on me. I just had to go for myself and see what it was like. One night I went and decided to pay for a dance. It just so happens I got a dance from one of the strippers he sees. Little did I know meeting her was going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I was a bit drunk and tipsy, so I overshared with her about my boyfriend and told her about him. She said she knew who I was talking about because he'd always talk badly about me to the dancers. I just broke down and cried right there like a big idiot in front of her. She gave me a tissue to wipe my tears and gave me a huge hug. She said she didn't know what my boyfriend was talking about because she thought I was beautiful. It made me cry even more because it made my day for a girl to think I'm pretty at least. I kept going every so often, then eventually we exchanged numbers and started going out. I was so surprised to see she dressed like a boy when she wasn't working and to learn that she was gay. She told me she doesn't like men at all, but she makes good money off of them. People really surprised me a lot. She had / has the cutest personality ever. She opens doors for me and would ask me if I was tired or if I had anything to eat. I realized I was attracted to her and she was attracted to me. This kept going on for a few months. One night she kissed me and told me to leave him and to move in with her. We had intercourse and she made me look at myself in the mirror and tell myself I'm beautiful. I thought it was time to leave him because at that point I realized I deserved better than to be emotionally, mentally and verbally harmed almost every day by someone I used to love. While he was at work she helped me pack up everything. I sent him a text detailing why I was leaving him. I changed my number and blocked him on everything. I live with her far away from him and haven't heard from him in months, and honestly I'm glad. I don't care about your opinions on my cheating on my abusive boyfriend. I have no regrets. If I never cheated on him I would have never found the power to leave his toxic and abusive butt and be with a girl who loves all of me and makes me feel so beautiful. We've been together for 6 months and I'm still so in love with her. She's still the same loving and sweet person she was when I first met her. And she's amazing in bed, like full-blown amazing. She makes me come all the time and he hardly ever did. Maybe only once a month if I'm being honest. She works at a different club now and I found a new job I'm starting soon and I'm so excited for new stuff to come my way. I feel so blessed and lucky. How did everything go wrong when you took a DNA test? Part 2. In my previous post, I said that my grandmother promised to tell everyone when my sister comes to town next week. Officially, that is still the plan, but my sister, who apparently missed her calling as a special prosecutor, got my grandmother to admit to her over the phone the story of what actually happened. And it is interesting. Without going too much into my family history, when I first noticed the inconsistencies in my DNA test, I had an early idea who might be my bio-paternal grandfather. Basically, my grandmother had a long-time family friend that she had known even before my grandfather PG. To try and distinguish between the two men, I am going to refer to them as PG for Polish grandpa and BG for bio-grandpa. She and this friend maintained contact for years and years, all the way until both of their spouses had died and they married each other. Their kids had grown up together even before they became step-siblings as adults, and they are still part of my extended family as aunts and uncles even though BG died when I was a baby, almost 30 years ago. Over the years, there has been a bit of mild speculation that BG had possibly fathered my dad's younger brother. No one really took it all that seriously, but he did look an awful lot like one of BG's and his wife's kids. Because of this, the day I got my test results and figured out what they probably meant, I called my sister and we ordered a test for her best friend, one of BG's grandchildren. Telling this information to Grandma was what finally made her admit I was going to be matched as a cousin with my sister's best friend, who, although considered a part of my extended family, should have been of no biological relation to me. But here's where it gets a little confusing. My grandmother claims that PG was sterile as the result of something that happened to him in World War II. She says all 3 of her children are biologically from BG, but that it was all done intentionally through artificial insemination. She desperately wants this to be kept a secret from everyone, including my dad and his siblings, because she is worried that people will assume the worst about her. My dad and his siblings were born in the early 1950s. Does anyone know what the odds of this were? How common was artificial insemination back then? Would someone have really used a friend as a donor? More than 3 separate times my grandmother had at least one miscarriage that I remember her telling me about at some point. My grandmother has a known history of rewriting events in her favor. I guess it really does not matter at this point why BG was the father, but it is frustrating to feel like she might just be throwing in more lies on top of everything. What's the biggest high school house party you've been to? What happened? Warning, please do not do what I did. The consequences for doing so could ruin your life. Let's go back to early 2010, when I was in my sophomore year of high school. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was walking out of the school building after serving detention. My friend, I'll call her Claire for her privacy, was picking me up like she did every Friday. We drive to the local park and share a bowl and talk about school, and other subjects. As we are finishing up she mentions that some senior was hosting a party at his house on Sunday. Although I am initially reluctant, I eventually agree to go. Fast forward to Sunday night, and I arrive at this kid's door, and am immediately greeted with a beer from a kid I've never seen before. As I walk further into the house I see every single person drinking like it was their last day on earth. On the couch, I spot Claire, with a bottle of gin in her hand. She exclaims, "Jack's in the middle of party," and invites me to sit next to her. The next few hours were uneventful, so I'll skip to where it gets interesting. As I tried to stand up I realized that walking on a few beers was harder than I thought. Claire was even worse and I had to help her up the stairs to one of the bedrooms. She asked me to close the door so we could have intercourse. To this day, I still don't know if it was the alcohol talking or not. After we both finish, I hear the word that no teenager at a party would ever want to hear: police. And sure enough there were police sirens outside. In a moment of panic I opened the window, and climbed out, falling all the way to ground, butt naked. I proceeded to run what felt like 100 miles but was more like 3 blocks before passing out. I awoke in the morning, still naked around a few trees. Of course I couldn't just walk home, so I had to call my mom to come get me, and believe me it was hard to find an excuse for that. On Tuesday I go to school. Didn't go on Monday for obvious reasons, and meet up with Claire who explains that the senior's parents were arrested because of the whole ordeal. We also talk about what happened between me and her, and eventually we decide to get together. We dated for 10 months before breaking up. Zaza plug taught me a lesson that changed my entire outlook on life. So I've been buying off of this guy for a few years or whatever, but I honestly never really took the time to talk to him or get to know him. It's really funny honestly because he's this big kinda gangster dude, and I'm just this little white kid who has no sort of context on what sort of life he is living, but alas, our paths have connected. The other day it was pouring rain, but I was already out and wanted to get stuff from him, so I hit him up and he told me to come to his place like normal. I get there and usually he will run down or sometimes have me come to his door, and this time I guess because of the rain he told me to come to the door. I get to the door and he just tells me to come in. The first time I had been inside his place and I honestly felt honored that he trusted me enough to be inside. We just started talking and then eventually this little baby girl walks out and it's his daughter. He introduces me and she's really sweet, only like maybe 5 or so. He tells me basically that her mom left them and he's been a single dad for years and he does what he does so that he can be with his daughter at all times when she needs him because he had no one else. The rest of his immediate family has passed away and all in tragic ways. My heart started to just feel heavy thinking about that, like how one person can deal with all of that. I take my life so for granted. I've always had everything handed to me. Then when minor things happen to me I make a big deal out of it, and here is someone who has gone through real tough shit and is standing 10 toes strong. So I asked him how he deals with so much on his plate or manages many things at once. He stopped and thought for a second and then he picked up a neon green lighter that was sitting on the table and he put it real close to my eyes horizontally so that it was blocking my vision, and he says, "What do you see?" And I told him I see green, the color of the lighter, and he said, "Right, but what objects do you see clearly?" And I just said nothing. Then he pulled the lighter back next to his face and said, "Now what do you see?" And I was confused, but I said, "I see the lighter." And he said, "Exactly, and that if you try to overanalyze things and look at them too closely then you will be lost trying to make sense of things. The best way to handle things is to look at the big picture and see what you're working with and how it can work for you. Never give any one thing too much of your energy, whether it's positive or negative." What was the creepiest thing that ever happened to you at a function? When I was about 12, my parents went away for a function, so my brother and I had the house to ourselves. We got pizza and watched movies and had the best day ever, along with our adorable German Shepherd dog called Chaka. When it got dark some boys from school showed up at our front gate calling for me. My brother stayed inside, peeking through the curtains as I went outside to greet them. I knew them well from school and was puzzled by their appearance, since kids didn't usually go out in the neighborhood after dark. There was an older guy, about 19 or 20, with them that immediately made me feel uncomfortable. He leaned against our fence and eyed my body, biting his lower lip. One of the boys hurriedly said it was one of his cousins and I should ignore him. "Come on out with us," the boy said. "We want to show you something." "No, it is late," I replied, remembering how I boasted at school that I'd be home alone. "Okay, wait, we have something for you," the other boy said as he turned around and got something that he had hidden behind the lamppost. He returned with a brown bottle, filled with liquid, with the label removed. It was already open. "Here, drink this." "No," I said, and they just kept insisting I drink it, saying it wasn't that strong, tasted good and that I'd be fine. My heart was beating in my chest. I felt nervous as the older guy kept looking at my bare legs, playing with the latch on the fence door. Suddenly Chaka, our dog, appeared from behind me and planted his bottom on my feet. He was a huge, wolf-like dog, and this low, deep rumble started to grow louder and louder as he growled. He stared the guy down, who hastily let go of the latch and backed away. The two boys also backed off quickly. It was as if Chaka sensed my fear and came to give me his strength. He would fight for me. I told them to go away and leave. I didn't want to drink their stuff. My dog sat like a statue on my feet, until they disappeared back into the darkness. My brother said he was watching the entire time for any signs of trouble, and couldn't believe how brave Chaka had been. When my dad heard about it, he gave Chaka a big steak as a reward. Chaka was my guardian angel. I still love him and think of him. He died in 2008. What could have happened if he weren't there? What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? The 24 hours before my dad died of lung cancer, he was in the ER and then the ICU, and we were unable to be with him because of hospital 2020 rules. My mother, sister and myself had been texting and calling him all day and got no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his ICU nurses, who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very quickly at 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes and he was gone. Later that morning, while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule his body for pickup at the hospital and going through his bag of belongings the hospital had returned to us. His phone was in there and I wanted to read all our texts and take some comfort in my last words to him. I opened his phone and all our texts had not been read, not mine or my mom and sister's. I thought this was so odd, but figured he must have been suffering so much he couldn't find the strength. I began to scroll through his apps and noticed a chat app I'd vaguely heard of. I can't recall the name, but it essentially works like WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. I started reading and realized my dad has been chatting with this girl hourly for the last 24 hours and as far back as I could scroll. He was calling her princess and telling her he loved her, and she was saying she was scared for him and wanted to know what was going on. Why was he in the ER? I scrolled back enough to know that this was someone he was having, at the very least, an emotional affair with. My grief was completely hijacked by hurt and anger, and a week later I tracked the girl down and spoke to her and found out she was 15 years old. She was 13 when they met. He was her high school bus driver and she told me they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old. When he died and dating someone younger than his grandchildren, someone he chose to spend his last moments with and say his last goodbyes to. What is the most disturbing thing you have ever found out? Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide and seek parties with my friends, and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and acted like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then the day was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place. My dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact his brother wanted to be in his children's life until he got a call. I was in my room, packing my stuff, when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk. Mom had a lot of money saved up from a minor lotto win, so we were okay, and she always smiled and said Daddy is just away for a little while because he was looking after me and my siblings whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mom saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right on back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate him coming home. We had food and cake and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best after all. One day, a year or so later, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. I see Uncle Mark standing there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him, that he's a bad person like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and his parents had changed their mind and made to take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just appear. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after that except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed and took me in a hug. He told my mom to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years my dad was gone. My mom eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us and we all guessed he'd done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. Turns out Mark had an interest in kids. And that day I was meant to go to his house. Mark's wife had called my dad and told him she'd found some pictures under her and Mark's bed of kids and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man and it was later revealed he abused her, so she was scared to call the police on him. And my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He'd smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had hurt Uncle Mark within an inch of his life. Uncle Mark screaming he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. Messed up thing was, by the time my dad had explained why he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burned them and scared his wife into saying nothing, so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault but made sure my other uncles and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But oh no. Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe. And then, according to my dad, had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? People didn't believe my dad when he explained who Mark was. They thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school. My dad had tripped and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school, so he didn't have long. Difference was, though, my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So, he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again, after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge for being called out. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures. Lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait 1 hour and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house. And then proceeded to take his life. My dad was arrested for taking his life and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they'd done his job for him. He said he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him I was forever going to be proud of him for that, and that I loved him.